If you were in school anytime from the 1990s onward, the chances that you've experienced a lockdown drill are very high. Obviously, not all of them end in tragedies. Schools can go into lockdown because of a crime committed nearby, or because some parent forgot to wear their visitor badge, or any number of reasons, most of which tend to be harmless. But better safe than sorry. I went to school in a post-Columbine world. Lockdowns were always taken very seriously, despite the fact that we lived in a fairly rural area where most people knew each other. Nearly all of these lockdowns are drills, but I'm going to tell you about one that wasn't. I've always been a pretty nervous, paranoid person. For example, throughout middle and high school, I despised being in the cafeteria because I always seemed to get stuck sitting in some corner nowhere near an exit. It made me anxious, realizing just how much distance I'd have to cross to get out, even if something as innocent as a food fight broke out. But like most routines, after enough repetition, you can get used to almost everything. If you work in a school, you probably know this like the back of your hand. In the event of a lockdown, teachers are supposed to lock the door, turn out the lights, and herd the students into a part of the room that cannot be seen from the window panel on the door. This always seemed a bit ridiculous to me. I once had an English class in a room where the only spot that you could not see people from the door was, ironically, right beside the door. The idea of all of us just lining up there while someone jiggled the knob outside sounded horrifying. However, my one major concern was always what would happen if I were caught in one of these drills outside the classroom. Was I supposed to run and bang on the nearest door, hide in a closet, run outside? Privately, I had come to the conclusion that if it came down to it, if I were near an exit and it seemed like the real deal, I'd take my chances running outside. Better out than in. Teachers never really told us during drills whether they were drills or not, but someone always knew. There was always one kid whose mom was a secretary who would whisper to everyone else that yeah, it wasn't real, and that we'd be having a fire drill 5th period tomorrow too. A girl named Kelly once informed our entire algebra class, ignoring the teacher's glare. If they see lockdown 3 times, it's a drill. 4 times, it's real. We all snickered, but what she'd said lingered in the back of my mind every time the principal went on the loudspeaker, voice crackling throughout the building. I always counted, always waiting for that 4th time. It never happened, of course. 11th grade swung around. Now officially an upperclassman, I let a certain confidence seep into my walk. I was 16. Next year I'd graduate. I no longer felt the need to rush into first period as if I were being pursued by wolves. Instead, I lingered in the hallway with other juniors and seniors, made fun of confused freshmen, and actually made eye contact with teachers. This newfound confidence was what led to me cutting the first period bell very close. Someone had tripped on the bus and gotten what I prayed was iced coffee on my jacket. The stain did not look like it was coming out though, and I hadn't brought another jacket, so I balled up the paper towel and chucked it at the garbage, but I missed. As I knelt down to pick it up, through the thick bathroom walls, I heard the distant crackle of the loudspeaker. I thought to myself, were they starting morning announcements earlier this year? Maybe someone had parked in a teacher spot again. And then I heard, "Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown." Initially, I was more caught off guard by the fact that it sounded like a secretary making the announcement than anything else. Only after a moment or two did it sink in. This wasn't a drill. I stood there, completely motionless, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. Finally, I lunged towards the door and yanked it open, peeking out into the hall. Every door was shut. I was on the 2nd floor. I thought I heard distant yelling from below. My panic began to settle into a slow, cold fear that pulled in the pit of my stomach and spread down my legs. I darted back into the bathroom, trying to rationalize things to myself. Maybe I'd misheard it and it was just a drill. I tried to remember how the woman on the loudspeaker had sounded. Had she been frightened, forced calm? I wasn't sure. The not knowing was the worst part. The police had to be on their way if it was real, I assured myself. So long as I stayed put, everything would be fine. What potential school shooter was going to check the bathroom? That said, I ran to the last stall, the one for people with wheelchairs, and scrambled up on the toilet. Here, my mind was flooded with questions. Should I lock the stall door? What if they somehow saw me through the small gap in the door? Could I somehow wriggle on the ground from one stall to the next, evading them? By this point, I was slightly hysterical, but I knew in the back of my mind, like you always know in these situations, if they did come in here, I would probably die. I began preparing my last lines. What would I say? Should I plead with them? What if it was someone I knew? Maybe I could talk them down. Should I try to be the hero and go for their gun? Maybe I could stall them. At this point, I started to laugh. I didn't know why. My manic chuckles faded into harsh breathing, and I concentrated on my knees. I told myself I wouldn't look up, no matter what. I thought I heard a loud noise from down the hall, and I flinched, although I had no idea what it had been. I tried to still my breathing and only succeeded in feeling faint. And then I heard it. Footsteps. I was sure of it. Maybe it was a cop, I told myself weakly. The footsteps drew nearer, echoing hollowly on the tiled floor of the school. I wasn't raised religious, but right then and there, I started to make bargains. I didn't care if I got shot, so long as it didn't kill me. I just wanted to go home. If whoever was in charge of this all just made sure I got home, I'd do whatever the hell they said to do for the rest of my life. I tried to stay optimistic. Maybe they didn't have a gun, maybe it was a knife. Maybe I could get out of this with a few nasty scars and a story. Then the door opened, and I went blank. I'm not sure how to describe it. I was there, and yet not there at all. I felt completely removed from the entire event. I was there in the stall, yeah, but I also wasn't. Like maybe it didn't really matter that much either way, like I was beyond all of it. For a fleeting second, I wondered if I'd collapsed and died of fright. I knew they were there. I heard them. The first stall swung open with a groan, as did the second. I tried to close my eyes and found that I couldn't. My eyelids refused to cooperate. They opened the third stall. I was convinced I could hear them breathing. I wondered what they were thinking. Were they excited? Could they hear my breathing? They moved on to the fourth stall, the one right before mine. Then the loudspeakers crackled on and a voice came over. The lockdown is now completed. Students and staff, thank you for your cooperation. I heard the intruder pause, and moments later, I heard them leave the bathroom, door swinging quietly shut behind them. But I didn't leave that stall for another 5 minutes. My first period teacher was very annoyed. I didn't really care. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. I told him what had happened. He called the vice principal down. I told her what had happened. She was skeptical. I've never heard anything more about it. There was no evidence of anyone having gone in that bathroom during the lockdown, aside from what I claimed. But someone had been in there with me, and they'd been so close to finding me. Of that I was certain. It hadn't been a drill. A few years ago, during the whole killer clown era, a few clowns on Twitter threatened to come to our school at 11 a.m. Thankfully, the school picked up on it, so the day before they sent out emails to parents and planned a lockdown at 10:30 in response to the threat. Sitting in history class that day, I heard the familiar sound of the lockdown alarm, immediately followed by the teacher rushing to the windows and door, locking and closing them. To be honest, I was not that worried. I really thought that it was just another empty thread online and nothing would happen. But after 40 minutes of silence, sitting on the cold floor in the corner of the room, the green emergency light turned off and the air conditioning slowly fell silent. And then the hallway light switched off, as if the school had cut the power. But why? At this point, me and my classmates were staring at each other. We all knew that something real was going on. After 10 minutes or so, we could all hear a faint banging noise coming from down the corridor, shortly followed by heavy and fast footsteps. Someone was running down the hallway. They started banging on the lockers, and we heard them scream they were going to kill us. At this point, a few girls started quietly crying. Then, the most terrifying thing ever happened. One of the men, dressed as a clown, ran up to my class door, banging and screaming. Multiple people were crying now, and my friend even whispered to me that he thought we were gonna die. I started crying too. But then out of nowhere, the man swiftly moved away from our door and his screams slowly faded down the hallway. After another 2 hours, the principal came on the loudspeaker, surprisingly explaining everything. He said that just after 11, 2 men walked into the school, one holding a kitchen knife, one holding a camera. Then they ran around the school, threatening to kill students. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, once police raided the school, they only caught 1 clown. Thankfully, no one was hurt though. Later that day, the school got over 20 buses to take the younger kids home. The kids 9th grade and over, like me, were told to walk home in groups and call the cops if we saw anything suspicious. But luckily, I made it home without complication. That following week was very hard for me at school, thinking that the second man would return with a gun or something, but nothing happened. Nonetheless, this will be scarred into my mind forever. The second clown, as far as I know, was never caught. I don't even think they're looking for him anymore, as I heard nothing about it for over a year. But the thought of him planning another attack has made me a lot more cautious when walking to school. After that day, the school hired a few on-campus police officers and installed some auto-locking features on doors and windows when the lockdown alarm goes off. This in general made me feel a little bit better in school, but what happened to us isn't something that you can forget about. It stays around forever.